Hello everyone, welcome back. I am very excited about today's video because it feels like a really important one. And that is, how do you know the difference between should I see a psychic or should I see a therapist? So if you are new here, welcome. My name is Lauren. I am a psychic. I'm also a psychic development coach, and I like to teach people how to use their abilities. And so because of that, I get a lot of psychics who want to learn. And one of the common problems that we have as psychics is knowing when should we send our client to a therapist. This is something that we're told all the time. We hear it from each other. We know we are not therapists, and we know that our advice should not take the place of a therapist. So when do you send someone to a therapist? I think this has been something I have struggled with for years. And I was finally literally forced, to find an answer to this problem. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the signs of how you might know your client or you yourself as someone receiving the reading needs to maybe move from a psychic to a therapist, or even vice versa. I'm also going to talk about the difference between therapy and psychic readings, so you know maybe which one to go to. And then if you are a reader, I'm also going to talk about how do you tell your client this? How do you break this news gently? How do you do it and not be attacked? This video has been one that I've always wanted to create, but I literally didn't know how to talk to it. And I think that's because I didn't know the answer to these questions of do you see a therapist or do you see a psychic? When I was learning, I was just kind of flat out told, you're not a therapist, they need to go somewhere else for therapy. And I was like, cool, got it. But then when I started doing readings, and more recently when I had a series of readings that were just awful, they were several people in a row that I just knew needed to see a therapist and not me. But I couldn't define it. I couldn't be well, this is why you need to see a therapist. Basically, through these readings, I really had to answer this question for myself so that I could be upfront about it and say, hey, this is what to expect from me. This is what to expect from a therapist, so you know which direction to go. And this can be really hard because you might not have ever been to a psychic, or you might not have ever been to a therapist. So how are you supposed to know which one to go to? And I think it's really unfair to expect our clients to just know this. And I think we as the psychics and we as the therapists as well might need to inform our clients which one is for what. So ultimately, I knew that my guides were pushing me because I was answering this question for myself and defining it and kind of putting it in a disclaimer up front in front of my readings. And I feel like I was just kind of forced to deal with this in a very hard way. I was this close to giving up and being I'm done with readings, because it was just reading after reading after reading. I just got people that were mean, hostile, that, really truly needed a therapist, and they were looking for me to be their therapist. And whenever something like that happens, usually I say, okay, what's going on? I'm clearly attracting this, and why is that happening? And I had to say, well, you know what? I'm not being clear on the definition between me versus a therapist. So I'm going to answer this once and for all. I'm going to figure it out. And then I can say, no more to this energy, no more of these types of clients. So this video is not just my own knowledge. This is also a pool of knowledge that I have received from other psychics, my therapist, social workers that I've talked to. I have done my research around this to where I feel like I've gotten enough voices in here that I can accurately say, this is the difference and this is which one you should go to. So because of that, I want to give a shout out to my good friend Allison, who went through the Aspen program with me. We had a great conversation about this. She's also a social worker and an intuitive. She did my life coaching, by the way, if you're looking for a life coach. And also Molly the Medium, who I think is a fantastic, super ethical psychic. She's a great one that's out there. We also had a great conversation, so thank you, Molly, for all your input. As well as, I don't want to name my therapist's name, but thank you to my therapist who was also willing to talk about this. So this is not just my knowledge, this is a lot of people's opinions that I've kind of condensed down into an easy to read like list. One that you as a psychic can put up on your website and inform your clients, or again, if you are just looking to get into a psychic reading or maybe a therapist session, how to know that difference between which one you should go to. So what are some of the potential signs that you could see either in your client or in yourself? Now, just fair warning, there's a lot of gray area in here. Just because you have these signs doesn't always mean you need to see a therapist. You have to trust your gut. You have to trust your intuition. For me, one of the signs that I see is just when they break a lot of the ethical rules that I have set up front. For example, like I try really hard not to read into other people's energy without their permission. And so if we start to get into a reading where we are wanting to nitpick someone else's feelings, emotions, like down to what are they feeling? How do they feel? What did they think about this? What did they think about that? That's a huge red flag to me, that they're so focused on someone else when in actuality they really need to be focused on themselves. Again, hard or gray area, I should say. Now, if you are kind of new to like ethics as a psychic, it's something that I really highly like tout, if that's the right word. And I'm all about being a very ethical psychic. In my new psychic development masterclass course, I list out every single one of these ethics. So there's more here, you know, and I do find that when people are crossing ethics, one, it could be that they just don't know, you know, they don't know the ethics of being a psychic. However, if you have been clear about them up front and they are still crossing those boundaries, that's getting into the territory of asking this question, is there a better place for them instead of seeing a psychic? Another huge sign for me is that they are just super emotional or super desperate. Like, I mean, like next level. It's one thing to come to a psychic because you're emotional and you want some help, but when they cannot calm down during the reading, when they are, you know, just like super anxious, super angry, super desperate, like needing answers to the point to where like they're not hearing the information that's coming through. That to me is a sign of like, okay, this information is not helping you. There is something else that you need to be kind of like working on. And psychic information is clearly not like giving you what you need. Another huge red flag, seeing you too often. Somebody that needs to see a psychic too often, that's not what a psychic is for. A psychic should be someone you see periodically. And we'll get into this in the difference between therapy and psychics, but seeing you too often means that there is a reliance on you. And that is not a territory we want to get into with our intuition. That breaks a lot of ethical rules that we have. Asking repetitive questions, like they ask the same question over and over and over and over and over, even though you've already answered it and you're like, okay, I'm not gonna change my mind, like I got what I got. Like they're clearly wanting me to give them something very specific. Again, I've had people that do this that don't need therapy, and I've had people that do this that do need therapy. These are just some signs to kind of like keep in mind. Another big sign for me is when they are trying to control someone, something, or more importantly, their future. Somebody who is trying to control the future obsessively, that is like a huge red flag for me because they think that a psychic can fix their future. But in actuality, the only one that can fix their future is them. So when I find that people are super obsessed about what is going to happen, usually that's a sign of anxiety and a sign of feeling like they lack control or that they lack the ability to handle this situation. And again, I think that's a better place for therapists. I'll get into that again in a bit. So again, with these signs, gray area, huge gray areas. So you just have to trust your gut here. There could be things outside of even what I listed. And the hardest part about this is that you just have to trust your gut. Ultimately, you're going to feel though, as a psychic, you're going to be like, this doesn't feel like it's working and I don't think it's me. You know, as long as you've done that check of like, well, I don't think it's me. I think I am getting accurate, intuitive information. I'm giving it to them. This is not any different than any other reading. Then, you know, that might be a sign to trust your gut And we will talk about how do you tell the person this in the moment after we talk about the difference between therapy versus psychic readings. Now, as someone who has been a psychic for a really long time and has been to therapy every now and then, I've been in therapy for about the last 6 months. I wanted to kind of explain what I see as the differences between this. Again, this is also opinions from my therapist, a social worker who is also a intuitive, and another psychic. So therapy is about how to handle thoughts and behaviors that you might have. It's about challenges that you have in your life and how do you work with those behaviors. It's about changing those behaviors so that you can function better, is what my therapist said. And I really liked how she said that. I feel like if you have a issue with control, if you have an issue with a certain like eating habit or something that's a behavior that you want to change, maybe a psychic is not the best place for that. Maybe a therapist is going to be better helping you with that. And that is also because therapists are more about long-term work. You don't just go and see a therapist one time in theory. What you are supposed to be doing with a therapist is seeing them often. The point of therapy is to work on things long-term and as they come up. So if you feel like a problem that you might have can be solved in one session, maybe a psychic. However, if this is something that is reoccurring for you, if this is something that you deal with every single week, like for example, social anxiety, maybe a therapist is somebody you should talk to about that. Now, the great thing about therapy is that you can meet often, whereas psychics, ethical, good psychics will tell you, don't come to me too often. Now, if you're really confused, yes, there are psychics out there that will tell you to come to them often. That's a big red flag. That's a no-no. They shouldn't be doing that. In an ideal world, all psychics should be like, don't come see me often. Do not rely on me. Use your own intuition. However, again, if you need something on a more reoccurring basis, if you feel like this issue is going to take longer than one session, a therapist might definitely help you out there. With a therapist, expect what I like to call left brain, analytical, educated help. They are not saying that psychics are not educated or helpful or anything, but when you are thinking about the challenge that you're having, the thing that you want to get help with, are you wanting some intuitive advice or are you wanting some analytical, educated advice? For example, when I saw a therapist this time around, it was because I went through a really traumatic event and I didn't feel that intuitively I could just wish this away. I really needed skills and coping mechanisms and tools that were from an educated professional to help me work through the trauma that I was going through. And so I leaned towards a therapist for that reason. So depending on your question, think about what type of information you would like to get in return. Now, one interesting thing I learned about therapists is that they cannot tell you what to do. And that was really frustrating for me when I first started therapy, was I was like, why doesn't she just tell me what to do? Just tell me what to do. And I think that has good reasons. There's good reasons for that. You're supposed to make your own decisions. However, you will come across psychics that will tell you what to do. I don't think that they should provide suggestions. However, therapists sometimes won't even go that far. They'll be very vague. I would say my therapist offers up ideas, but she never tells me what to do. So there, you could get a little bit of a variable here. But I thought it was very interesting. Therapists can't tell you what to do. They're just not allowed. And on that same note, therapists are basically, they have a lot of legalities that they have to watch out for. They have a lot of ethics as well. I would say even more than psychics that they have to adhere to. So in a way, they are kind of limited in what they can do. And I use that word lightly because I do think they can obviously help more than a psychic. And so I don't want to be like, if you need someone to tell you what to do, go see a psychic, because that's not what I'm trying to convey at all. But I think it's something to keep in mind, depending on, again, what you're looking for. Another big thing with therapists is they are trained. They are trained to help people. Not saying, again, that psychics are not, but psychics are often self-taught. Psychics can be book smart. They can just read a book or an article and be like, I'm a psychic, and start a business. So you don't know where that training comes from, especially if they're not like transparent about it. So I have had no training on how to help people in any sort of official capacity. I've had a lot of training in psychic development. I've had very, very good mentors on, teaching me how to handle different people. I have a pretty good intuition about me, but I don't have the same professional training that a therapist might have in helping people. So that can be a downside of psychics for sure. So now let's get into what exactly psychics do and what you should expect out of a psychic reading. Now, a psychic reading is really a tool to give you more information about a situation. You are looking for intuitive information, not logical, educated information. You want to know more from a divine source. Divine information that a therapist technically could not provide. A psychic is also, again, somebody that you only see short term. It's somebody that you would only need to go to maybe once every 3-4 months. Anybody that's going to a psychic on a regular basis, that's always a huge red flag for us psychics, and it's something that most psychics, again, should discourage. Not all of them do, but it should be something a little bit more short-term and quick. Like, my favorite clients are the ones that will come in to get more information, maybe I'm making a decision, and then they'll disappear for 4 or 5 months, and then they will come back after things have changed significantly enough, and really they just want more information intuitively about a situation now that it's changed. Another thing I think psychics should be doing is they should be reading the energy right now. Like, in contrast, a therapist can help you prepare for the future. They can give you the tools and resources for adjusting for the future. Not saying that a psychic can't do that, but I really feel like if you are reading the future so much as a psychic, you're really not helping a person out. Really, you want to be reading the present moment. What can they do right now to manifest the thing that they want? So I feel like if you don't want that out of a reading, if you don't want to know what you need to do right now, maybe go see a therapist if you're really stressed out about the future. And I know that sounds like so opposite, but I do think that there is a misconception that psychics only read the future. And this is something that I tell people all the time. Like, yes, I can read the future, but it's going to change. It's going to change tomorrow. You can make a decision, and what I give you right now could all just go out the window. And every time I say this, I always get nasty, like, well, what's the point of even seeing a psychic? And I'm like, well, the point is you don't go reading the future. You try to get the most accurate information and read the information as it is right now. What can you do right now to change it? Yes, I can do it, but is it the most beneficial information? No. And am I touting that you should be reading into the future? Most ethical psychics do not. So again, that's why I have such like a stigma against like future readings, is because truly I think it's about control and not feeling in control. And I feel like if that is what's going on, there's something deeper that needs to be worked through than just like trying to force a certain outcome. I really think that that's a good place for a therapist so that you don't feel like the future is out of control. Now, again, with a psychic, you are expecting information that is intuitive. It's right brain, it's divine help. If they are giving you therapy or counseling information, not the right psychic for you. A lot of psychics don't actually use their intuitive abilities, they don't get psychic hits, and they just kind of counsel people. This is like another huge no-no for a psychic. It's something that I teach. You always want to stay in that right brain. You always want to go back to the psychic source. You always want to pull the advice from them, not from your own stuff. Not saying you can't like use your own like stories or experiences as examples. Like, I do that all the time, as long as it's intuitively something that you should be sharing. However, if you feel like a psychic is counseling you, they're not doing, their job as a psychic. They're supposed to be providing psychic information. So you might as well just go see a therapist anyway. Psychics should, again, also not tell you what to do, but they do, probably more than a therapist. So I do think that that does have its benefits. If you are going to a life coach, they will kind of give you homework of what to do, like, or an intuitive life coach. I think some psychics will give you suggestions. I give people suggestions. I say, I think that this is the best like, this is what I would do. This is based on the information that's coming through my suggestion. I always preface that with like, you make your own decisions, but not all psychics do. There's a lot of like unchecked psychics out there, and that is because there is no governing body. There is no board of ethics or board of psychics overseeing everyone. And I think that's truly a big downfall of the psychic industry, is there's no standardized like, hey, these are the rules that we should all operate as for being like a good psychic. But I think because of that, because there's no governing body, there's some good things that do come out of that. Again, when there's less rules and less restrictions, I think there's more freedom to do the things that you want to do as a psychic. However, just keep in mind that that could mean unethical psychics. It could mean bad apples. It could just mean psychics doing things not in the most like correct ethical way. And then lastly, psychics are not always trained. They're definitely probably not trained on how to handle people or how to help people unless they have some sort of psychology background. I think that those people are probably extra amazing psychics because they have that combined knowledge. However, again, you could literally pick up a book, pick up a tarot deck and be like, I'm a self-proclaimed psychic. And maybe they have never had any practice at all, and they're calling themselves a psychic. I know, unfortunately, way too many people that I could count on both hands right now in this moment that call themselves psychics, that have had absolutely no training, that have poor ethics, that read people and charge people, and I really think they should not be doing this work. And so just know that there's people out there that are going to be like that. They're not going to be trained. However, if you are looking for a psychic that is well trained, find somebody that is very clear about where they learned from. So for example, if you go on my website, you will see all the certifications that I got. I went through classes, I read volunteers, I read for like many, many years. I also coached at a program before I jumped into being a full-time psychic. So I'm very transparent about how I learned. I'm not just book smart. I've learned by practicing, reading tons and tons of people, but I've also coached people on how to develop their abilities. And I think both of those things gives me the credit that, you know, is the credit that I have, I guess. But again, I think there's people out there that will do the bare minimum, that will not understand how their psychic ability works, that will not care to learn more about ethics, and they'll just go out there willy-nilly and read, and it could be a really bad experience for some people. So the good psychics might be well trained, the bad psychics may not be trained at all. So hopefully through that list, you're able to understand what you might need or what your client might need. So think of the problem that you are having. Is that better suited for a psychic or for a therapist? You know, I have a reoccurring problem with social anxiety. That would probably be a person that you send to a therapist. Versus, you know, I'm trying to make the decision of should I go for this job or this job? They're both very equal. I don't know. I'm going to go see a psychic because that's just going to be like a one-time thing. Now, honestly, sometimes you're not going to know as the person receiving the reading. You could try a psychic, and then if it doesn't feel good, you could then go and try therapy. I basically did that as well. It took me a while when I went through my traumatic event, and I instinctively knew that a intuitive reading was just not going to help me because I knew I needed to talk about it a lot. I knew I needed to process it out loud. And so that's why I went to a therapist. Again, I also did not feel in control of my own thoughts. And no matter how much meditation or mindfulness I did, I felt like I could not change the way that I was thinking about this event. And so that was another sign to me of like, okay, I need new information. I need a new way of thinking, and I need a professional to tell me like what tools are available to me, like how I can move through this trauma. Now, as a psychic, if you are reading someone and you're just not sure, trust your intuition. Just ask your intuition. You know, you can just ask, hey, am I suited for this, or is this better dealt with for a therapist? And you can just ask it like you would any other intuitive question and see what comes through. Does this need to be solved with a therapist, or can I help in this regard? Now, let's get into, lastly, as a psychic, you recognize that you need to tell this person that they need to see a therapist, that this is no longer in your wheelhouse. How do you deal with that? And I will say, every time this comes up, I never have a positive response, so it sucks. I don't want that to be the case for you. I want you to have the tools that you need so that if you are experiencing this in the middle of a reading, you know what to say. So there's a few things that you can say to this person. One is just like, I'm not specialized as a therapist. I don't know if I can speak to this. You can also say, I don't specialize in trauma. I don't specialize in marital relationships or something like that. You can kind of explain that, look, this is going beyond my wheelhouse. I don't know if I can speak to it anymore. And I will say that people do appreciate that. They don't want information that seems like half-assed. They want you to say where your knowledge kind of like begins and ends, if that makes sense. You can also say, I don't feel qualified to speak to that. This is beyond what I think I'm capable of doing. I think one of my favorite lines is like, I think I've done everything that I can for you in this session. So just being very clear with your boundaries of like, I've done what I can, and what you're asking for is kind of going beyond what you're hoping to get from me. And I think I struggled with this for the longest time because I felt that I had to solve all their problems. I felt that I needed to answer every question because in theory, with your clairs, you should be able to answer any question. However, I would get stuck and I felt like I had basic information. I could kind of feel what was next. And I do sometimes get very specific information, but then it would be like, this is no longer like in your wheelhouse. This is like getting into therapy work. That's what they need. And you just don't have the context for that. So you can just simply say like, I'm intuitively getting that you need to maybe see a therapist next. It was Molly that gave me the phrase, just blame your intuition. Just say, this is intuitively what I'm getting. You know, I'm intuitively getting that you need to see a therapist. Even if it's like logically, you're like, I know this person needs to see a therapist, you can blame your intuition. Ultimately, I think it's important to give yourself permission to not solve every problem. You do not have to answer any question, especially if you don't feel like you can speak to it. Even though we are getting information intuitively, if you just feel blocked, if you feel like, I don't have the context to go that deep or that far, you know, you can just say that. Say, I'm not experienced in this. This is further than what I can explain. I think I've done everything I can to help you intuitively. And please understand that there is a stigma around therapy, so you might get a little bit of a backlash because I think people think, oh, a therapist, there's something wrong with me. They're implying that something's wrong with me and that I can't see a psychic. And I have had several people be very mean when I've said this, when it wasn't a personal attack at all. I've had people also tell me, well, I'm in therapy and it doesn't work. And it's like, okay, definitely go back to therapy. So just know when this happens, don't take it personally. That was the hardest thing for me, is just I didn't know. I was pushing myself to speak up and say, okay, this is me growing as a psychic and I'm going to tell them this is not my wheelhouse. And then I got backlash and then I took that as like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. When in reality, that's their own stuff. It had nothing to do with me. It was a good thing that I didn't try to speak to something that I wasn't experienced in speaking about. I've often found that these people are also very unsatisfied, and so they might try to push over time and make you feel like you have to go longer and answer all their questions and give them the questions or the answers that they need. You don't have to do that. You can always say, our time is up. I'm going to end the reading here. I don't know why that's such like a theme, but I think they're so desperate for answers that they think they can push you further on like time. So just, I don't want to say like this will always happen, but just know what to do and know what to expect. Because I just had to learn the hard way. I went in the dark. Like I knew clients would come across my way that would cause issues, but this was just like recently within the last year, it was all new territory for me, and I kind of had to figure it out on my own. It's a lot of the reason why I felt like I went through it was because I'm supposed to share it with you, and I was kind of like the sacrificial lamb. And my guides are like, you're going through this so you can learn and help other people go through it. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna learn it, but then make it stop, please. What you can do instead is point them to resources. If there's like an article that you can send them to, you don't even have to write it, like how to find an insurance provider or like how to find a therapist, like you can send them that information. If you have like a referral of somebody that you know, or like a company that you've worked with before, you can send that to them. It's always helpful to, as like a psychic, you know, because it often gets so mixed up with therapy, to have that resource like ready and available. And maybe at the very least, it's just like an article of like how to find a therapist. And at least you're walking away giving them something beyond, you know, what you can do, and you're not just like leaving them hanging, if that makes sense. Not that that's your responsibility, but I do think it's important to point them in the right direction. You could also just educate them, you know, because I do think there's a lot of fear around signing up for a therapist. And I just tell people like, hey, I know it's scary and I know you might not think it's covered by your insurance, but just type in your insurance, and then say like if you have, I'm thinking Anthem, for example, Anthem insurance, therapist near me, and just see what comes up. You'd be surprised at how easily it is to find something in your area covered by your insurance if you like search it that way. And I think most people are too scared to just do it. And so if you just do that, you know, you're providing them one next step to hopefully get the help that they need. I think the best thing that you can do though is make all of this information clear up front. I have put this on my website and I have made it very clear. I even have a link to this video so that people can understand what to expect from me versus a therapist. If you want to copy and paste that and put it on your website, please, please do. I do not care. It is very important that you let your client know ahead of time what you will and what you won't do. So wrapping up this video, I hope that you have found some helpful tips, either as someone who's receiving readings or someone who is a reader. I just think that this has been one of the most important videos I've needed to make for myself and for all of you. So if you've watched the whole thing, thank you so much. I think Spirit also thanks you as well. I think it's so important that we understand these ethical rules and guidelines, and again, where a psychic starts and where a therapist starts and what the difference is. I think it can only make you a better psychic, a more ethical psychic. So please, if you have any questions about this video, please leave it in the comments down below. I also have a Patreon membership. You can jump in there. Every month we also have like a Q&A video. So if you have questions, if you have reoccurring problems with clients, I am here to help. My Psychic Development Masterclass course, I also go into depth on dealing with difficult clients and a lot of these ethical issues that you might face as a professional psychic. So if that's something you're interested in, maybe check that out. If you found this video helpful, please give it a big thumbs up, and I will see you all in the next one. Alrighty, bye.